But we are going to go ahead and get started. So I always get a lot of questions about my materials, so I'm going to say it once and then usually people will ask again. So if you feel like commenting and helping people out, go ahead. I will try to answer a few times, but it just gets a little bit tiring. So we have Strathmore watercolor paper here. This is the Series 400 watercolor paper. This is quite cheap. You can get this pretty much anywhere. Art stores, craft stores, all that stuff. This is a good like beginner paper. My paints are Winsor Newton paints. You can use whatever you like. These are professional grade watercolor paints, but it really doesn't matter. You can use whatever you want. I just watercolor a lot and I'm a professional artist, so that is what I use. And then my paint brushes are Princeton Neptune brushes. I've had these brushes for probably almost 2 years now, and they hold up really well, and I really like them. So if you're looking for a set of paint brushes that are gonna hold up, these are good. It's a little bit more of an investment, but they will hold up for a long time. So everything that I use, along with all of my other supply recommendations, are linked in my bio. There's a tab in my bio link called Art Supply Recommendations. So that's where you'll find anything that I've tried and recommend to you. Not just this stuff, but lots more. So here's the painting that we're going to do today. This is kind of a seascape and beach scene, as you can tell. This is from Turks and Caicos. And we're gonna kind of work from top to bottom here. We're gonna go for the sky and then the water and the sand, and then over the top we're gonna add these rock details and the grass. And then last we're gonna use some white paint of whatever kind that you have, and we're gonna add those little wave details. So that's kind of the order that we're gonna do this in. I will be referring back to this, and so don't worry, this is not the last time you've seen this. Okay, and I'll also put it right here. You know, I've thought about putting a card, but like I'm out of room for like somewhere to put, you know, people need to see these, everything that I have on here. So I have a hard time finding room to put a card that is legible. Okay. So the first thing that we need to do to get started, you can see I have my paper taped out here. You don't have to do that if you don't want to, but it just gives you a little bit of a border. This will be an hour. These tutorials usually last about an hour, a little less. We're going to put a little drop of water in every color that we have here. If you've been with me before, you know this is how we start all of our tutorials. It just gets the watercolor paint ready to go. You can use a spray bottle for this too if you have one, but I don't, and I've just always done this. While we're doing this, just keep in mind that this is all just for fun. We are here to be creative together and learn something and just, you know, make a painting. So it's not necessarily about how nicely the painting turns out, especially if you're new. Try not to put too much pressure on yourself to make like a quote-unquote good painting. And we're just all here to be creative and have fun. So just be gentle with yourself, be kind to others, and please be nice to me in the comments. And be kind to everybody else in the comments, please, too. If anybody's being mean, I'll try and catch it and block them, because this is a place for positivity. Okay, now that my little rant is over and my paints are soaking now, we're gonna start with our pencil sketch. So the first thing that we need, really the only kind of pencil mark that we need, is where the water is going to meet the sand here. And you can see it kind of curves around, and so this is kind of an interesting shape. So we're gonna go out flat and then curve around in kind of a long C shape here. So I'm gonna show you what that looks like on my paper. So this is gonna be like about a third of the way up my paper. So I'm gonna go about a third of the way up and flat. Let me see if I can move this so you can see a little bit better. So flat for a little ways, and then give myself a nice long C shape that ends just a little bit above the bottom here. Something like that. It doesn't have to look perfect. Let me grab my eraser real quick. And one thing that I like to do, especially because of this line here, we don't want to see this pencil line later. I do like to use my kneaded eraser to kind of gently erase this line that we just made so that I can still see it, but it's really, really light. And this way, once we paint over it later, we won't see this line super strongly through the painting. So I can still see that. You can see it's very faint, but it's still there. I can see it when I'm painting, but once I paint over it, it should kind of disappear. And then the other thing that we should kind of pencil sketch out are these rocks here. So this will be just above that little C shape. And we're just gonna draw out these rocks. These are gonna go just about to the middle of the paper here. So they're gonna start over here on the right and then over to the middle. And you can make these as tall or as short as you want. You can make them any shape, really. It will look like rocks. They're just kind of lumps. And we're just gonna kind of loosely draw this in. So I'll see if I can show you kind of up close here. So I like to draw out the flat bottom part first as a straight line, and then you can kind of do lots of wiggly lines over the top, kind of like that. Yes, I do. So the problem with the restock, if I might, hello, change the topic really quick, is that I'm going on vacation next Monday. So, and I have a few things to get done beforehand. So I need to kind of see where I'm at by tomorrow to see if I can restock those before I'm going on vacation. If I don't, then they will definitely be restocked by the middle of July when I'm back. And then I'm kind of off of vacations for a while. So after that, it should be good. But thank you for the question. All right, so now we have we can erase these lines too as well, but because these rocks are quite dark, we actually won't be able to see the pencil sketch very well at all, even if the pencil is dark. So we'll just kind of erase that lightly. Okay, so now we need our horizon line, and we need tape for this just because we need to have a nice straight line. Our horizon line is going to be just above where these rocks are. So some of the rocks might be into the sky, and that's okay. I like to use a ruler just so that I make sure I'm on the same place on each side. Maybe about +1. But you do not have to do that. You can just eyeball it if you prefer. I just like to be exact. And then we're going to take our tape. Across there, and because my tape is so thick, I just like to tear it in half because I need the two outside edges for the flat parts, and so this gives me 2 pieces of tape to work with, and we will need 2 pieces of tape for this, so that's why we do this. And then I just line it up with those 2 marks on either side, and we press that down. And I also like to use my thumbnail to make sure that tape is pressed down along the edge there so that we don't get any bleeding underneath. Okay, so you can see here that some of those rocks that I drew are above the horizon line here, and that's fine. And it's also fine if yours are not. It's totally good. Okay, so that's all the prep work that we need to do. We are going to get started with the first step here, which is the sky. You can see in this painting, it's just kind of a gradient from a nice saturated sky blue to a really light blue. And we're gonna do this by adding water as we work our way down. And this is a very good technique for painting sky, is to have the bottom of it really light, not really light, lighter than the top. It gives that atmospheric perspective. Okay, so we just need one color, which is a nice sky blue color. Sometimes I like to mix a couple of blues together in my palette just to give me the exact blue that I want, but you can just use whatever you have in your palette. And we do want to water this down a little bit, but we want this to be the color that we want on the top of the sky here. So we want this to be strong enough that it looks like the sky blue color. So I like to swatch mine. That looks pretty good. I'm sorry, I know the bookmarks are sold out a lot, but I'm just one person and I have to make those bookmarks myself, so it's hard to always keep them in stock. Otherwise, if I did, I'd never get anything else done. Oh, that's wonderful. I'm glad to hear that. Okay, so the general idea with this sky paint, with the sky section here, is to start with this blue color at the top. We're going to do a few horizontal stripes, and then we're going to slowly start to add in, good job, Hannah. Slowly start to add in some water. That's all right. It's a good thing that color's going there anyway. So less talking and I will go ahead and do it. So I'm going to start up here at the top with this color that I've mixed in my palette. I like to do horizontal stripes just because I feel like it blends together the best. I'm going to do about halfway down with these. And then I'm going to clean off my brush, dry it off some of the way so there's still a little bit of water in my brush. And then we're going to start blending downward the rest of the way with this damp brush. And this should pull that blue that we just put on the top all the way down to the bottom, but it'll lighten it up. And then you can just kind of go back and forth with your brush up and down until you've gotten it blended to your liking. You can also, if you're having trouble doing that, you can tilt your paper while it's still wet, and this will kind of make everything blend together even better. So you can see I'm just tilting it. This should kind of get rid of any little horizontal lines that we have remaining. So you can see we have lighter blue or darker blue and then transitioning to lighter blue down at the bottom. Okay. My cell phone is a 12 Pro, I believe. And then one other thing you can do, you don't have to, is just take a dry brush and we can add in some texture. If you've been to one of these before, you know I love to do this. When your painting is still wet, you can add in this texture of these clouds. With a completely dry brush, you can just kind of take away paint. And I like to do these little fluffy kind of clouds up here. Just kind of add some detail, but you don't have to do that if you don't want to. You can totally just have a clear blue sky. I'm basically just touching my brush. I'm holding it at an angle and I'm just touching my brush to the paper kind of randomly and quickly, which gives me the most random, natural kind of looking shapes. Ooh. I don't know why I'm continuing to touch it. I'm making it worse. Oh, Hannah. Okay, quit it. That's enough. So we're gonna let it dry. Painting outside, everything dried so fast. Yeah, that's the thing about painting outside, man. So there's our sky. And once it's done and you're ready to go, we can take off the tape for our horizon line. And we're gonna wait a minute or two for this sky to dry. So if you've got any art-related questions that you wanna throw into the comments, now is the time. Because we just wanna wait for that sky to dry before we move on. I do it a lot. I say, oh, Hannah. When did you start painting? When I was a small child. I think when I was like 3 or 4, probably whenever I could hold a pencil. What's the easiest color to blend? I don't know. They can all generally blend fine. It's a sky blue. Let's see, will your future paint and sips be on Sundays now on? No, usually they are on Saturdays at 3 p.m. Eastern time. I went to Pride yesterday and I also had a jiu-jitsu match yesterday, so I did not have time to do paint and sip yesterday. So usually they're on Saturdays, 3 p.m. Eastern time, but sometimes I do change them to Sundays if I cannot do Saturday. I won't get to all the questions, so I apologize. Yes, the other paint and sips will be added to IG. I'm having a hard time at home uploading them, which is weird because I used to be able to without a problem. But I think this week I'm going to go to a coffee shop and see if their Wi-Fi is better. So if it is, then I'll upload the 4, including today's previous paint and sips, to my Instagram. What is the white cloud? No, watercolor, sorry, I just tuned in. This is all watercolor. This was done by picking up the paint with a dry brush while it was still wet. Thank you, everybody. Do more bookmark TikToks, all right? Sounds good, thank you very much. Are you a full-time artist? Yes, I am. I've been full-time since October of last year, so about 9 months now, I believe. I'm always worried about dirty paint water. How frequently do you prease the water while painting? Hardly ever. I've done this demonstration before, and it won't be quite as, you know, I don't know. It won't be quite as noticeable now because we just started painting, but you can see this water looks blue in my cup. But if I just take some water out of it with my brush and put it on this paper, you can see it's still white. So even though it might look dirty in the cup, that's just because it's all in a cup and you can see all of it, but it's really not all that concentrated. So sometimes if I'm painting and I really notice that it's affecting my colors, I will change it, but honestly, you know, it has to get really dirty for it to actually start affecting the colors of your paint. What do you prefer, watercolor or acrylic? Definitely acrylic, or sorry, definitely watercolor. Acrylic is one of my least favorite paints because it's just dries so fast. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get into our next step here. Well, I'm gonna hair dry this little section here that I put too much water on. Really quick, I apologize for the noise. This is how we move on quicker. Do you paint wedding portraits? No, I do not. Hopefully you can still hear me. What's your favorite medium? It kind of differs. I have 4 that I've used a lot. Watercolor, gouache, oil, and acrylic. And I would say with the exception of acrylic, the other ones I like. And I just kind of cycle through which one is my favorite. Make a vid about the different results with the amount of water. I can. That's just kind of something that you have to experiment with to find out. But if you think it would be helpful, I'm happy to. Oh wow, we got 2,000 people on here. Hello, everyone. Okay. Yes, acrylic and watercolor, that's all personal preference. There is no one best medium. It is all just whatever you feel like using. Okay, so now my sky section is dry thanks to the hairdryer. We're gonna take our other piece of tape and line it up on the horizon line the other way. So now it's facing downward so that we can paint the ocean on top. So again, press that down with your thumbnail. And now we need to make some more colors. So we need our ocean color, so that's gonna be dark blue and kind of a light blue turquoise color. And then we also need the sand color because we want to paint all of that at the same time so it all blends together. So we've got 3 colors to make. I will walk you through. I'm just gonna clean up my palette. Okay. So we need a dark blue. I have an indigo in my palette that I like to use. You can see that's a very dark blue on my palette. I'll show you what it looks like just on paper. So it's a really pretty dark blue. This is my favorite color to use. So I'm gonna water that down just a little bit. But if you don't have indigo, just mix together blue and black to make a nice dark blue. Okay. And then our second color is a lighter blue. So if you want to just use the sky color that we used earlier, you can go ahead and do that. I would recommend you add just a touch of green to it though, or yellow, whichever one you want to do, to make it more of a turquoise. I have a turquoise color here, so I'm going to add that. But if you don't have turquoise, you can add green, just a little bit at a time until you get kind of a turquoise color. Okay, so those are our 2 blue colors. I'm going to add just a little bit more turquoise to this one. That looks good. So you can see how that's different from this sky blue color that we used. It's more turquoise, more vibrant, more green than this one. Okay, And then our last color is the sand color. Now the key to painting sand is to make a lighter color than you ever thought. So I'm going to use yellow ochre. You can just use orange or yellow, mix together whatever you want, add a little bit of brown to it. Whatever color that you think sand should be, kind of this golden yellow color, and then add a lot of water. And the reason that we do this is because sand is really close to white. I think our childhood and like coloring in beaches with like a yellow crayon taught us that beaches are yellow, but really they are really, really close to white with just kind of a yellow tint. So we want to water it down a lot. You can see that that's kind of barely there. That's the color that we want. We don't want this. That's not what we want. Okay, so those are our three colors. Now, in our pencil sketch, do you remember that we have these rocks that we painted in the background, and also this kind of C shape of the sand here? So the only thing that we want to not paint is this sand shape that we have. We can paint right over the rocks. They are dark. We will be able to paint them back out later. But we want to avoid painting in this sand area that we drew out first, okay? So here's how we're going to do this. We're going to start from dark, we're going to go from dark to light, so dark blue, light blue, sand color. And we're going to start at the horizon line and work our way forward. So I'm going to start with my dark blue, right at the horizon line, just start putting this in. Keep in mind where that sand shape is. Over here, this dark blue will basically come right up to that sand shape, so that's okay. I'm going to paint probably about a third of it with this dark blue. And then I'm going to switch to my turquoise. You want to do this somewhat quickly so that all these colors can blend together. Run that right up against that blue. This will all blend nicely together, just like water should. And we're going to take this down to just before that line that we drew in for the sand. Just slightly before it. Fill it in the rest. Okay. And then we're going to clean off our brush all the way. Dry it off part way so we still have a little bit of water on the brush. Blend out that edge with that damp brush. Like that. And then we can fill in the rest with the sand color. Just be careful over here not to touch the dark blue area. Oh my. So the sand color should kind of blend with that blue in the foreground, and avoid touching that back there. Now, this is looking a little bit messy, so you can see what this looks like here. So we're going to take our dry brush to the rescue, and pick up any areas that have way too much paint. You can use this if any of these areas kind of blended out of control. You can use this dry brush to pick up any of that extra paint that's kind of going rogue. Okay, so I've got too much here. We're going to kind of control that with this dry brush. We can add some, we can kind of help it to mix together in places that it didn't mix with this smaller brush here. Try to keep it to some horizontal strokes, just because water is flat, so we want to stay using horizontal strokes. But now that we've kind of controlled everything, it should start to look a little bit more regular. And if you had some accidental running of the paints, that's okay, just let it happen. This is all part of watercolor. There's too much paint over here. Pick some of that up. Just mess with it, pick it up until you're happy with it, and then, importantly, put the brush down, because you definitely can't overdo it. and I'm getting to that point, so I'm gonna put the brush down. Okay, and once you're done, you can take off the tape. You do not need to wait for it to dry. It will stay where you want it to. There we go. And a little bit of paper ripping there, so I can always go back and fix that later. But you can see that that gives us a really nice straight horizon line there, and I think that helps it a lot with looking natural and realistic. And I love this this like texture that comes with mixing those two colors together. You don't get this every time, but I really like when it does that. Yep, it's just Scotch masking tape from the hardware store. This is what I use. Go to the paint section of the hardware store and you'll find a bunch of masking tape. This is where I get mine. Have you ever worked with oil? Yep, I work with oil quite often. I've got some paintings in progress right now. Yeah, I really like working with oil paint. If it doesn't stay when you take off the tape, that means there's too much water. Yes, usually. Sometimes if you do it too soon, it can bleed. I was just saying that you don't need to wait for it to be totally dry. Can we use washi tape or will it bleed? Washi tape will probably work. Again, it's, you know, just find whatever tape works for you and what the kind of paper that you use. Sometimes it's a little bit of trial and error to find the paper that you like working with the best. Yeah, exactly. Only happy accidents. I did not go to art school. Oh yeah, this is the part where you can add some questions too, because we're gonna wait for this to dry. I did not go to art school. I took art classes in high school, and I was an art minor in college, but it was not an art school. I just did the art minor so that I could keep taking classes and keep, you know, having time for art. Where can you buy the watercolor set? Again, all of my art supply recommendations are in my bio. There's a tab in the link in my bio called Art Supply Recommendations, so that's where everything is available. I also recommend that you go to the art store if you can. Do you have to pay a lot for quality paint? Not necessarily. I think it's kind of a bell curve, or maybe not a bell curve, but like a, you know, at a certain point, more expensive does not equal better. You know, for a while, cheaper, you know, more expensive paints do have a increase in quality, but there's a limit to that. I studied psychology in college. How are you going to do the waves? We're going to use gouache, so, or whatever white paint that you have. So if you just have like white out, that would work. A white gel pen, white acrylic paint, whatever you want. Just something that's opaque and that's white. So I have gouache, but you can use whatever you want. Is oil painting harder than acrylic? Honestly, I think that acrylic is harder than oil paint. Oil paint stays wet for days, and you can keep mixing and you can keep blending everything together. And I think it looks prettier than acrylic paint. So honestly, once I tried oil painting, I was like, this is way easier than acrylic paint ever was. Acrylic paint certainly has its advantages as well. It's not, it's water soluble and it's a little bit less hassle of cleaning up and everything, but I like oil painting better. Do you feel pressured to paint all the time now that's full time? Yes, kind of. You know, I have projects that like need to be done by a due date and all that stuff, which I didn't have before. But honestly, like, I like painting every day. And so sometimes, you know, I'm not necessarily excited about every project that I have, but generally I am happy that I get to paint every day. Let's see. How do you clean oil paint brushes? So in between colors, you know, like how we put our watercolor brushes in a cup of water, we use paint thinner for oil paint, which is kind of the chemically part, because paint thinner is not all that good for you. So the fumes at least, so you want to make sure you have some airflow in your painting studio. But so in between colors, you clean it out in paint thinner, and then to clean the brushes when you're done, you use soap and water, dish soap and water. Here's the painting that we're going for again. How does that work? Do business hire you for a specific piece? Sometimes businesses, but mostly just individual people wanting gifts and stuff for, you know, commissions. People, you know, people want a painting for somebody, something that's meaningful for them. And then also I do get businesses that want paintings and or TikTok videos and stuff like that. Advice for beginners, definitely to practice a lot and not get discouraged about making mistakes. You will make a lot of mistakes, so just embrace that. And yeah, I guess just to keep going. You know, it's only, your paintings will only get better if you practice a lot. They will not get better if you do one painting and get mad that it's not perfect and then never paint again. That's not a way to get better at painting. So I just, and it's easier said than done, I know. I get frustrated with myself too because I still make bad paintings. But you are going to make a lot of bad paintings, and it's just part of being an artist. And do it if it makes you happy. Don't do it for any other reason than you enjoy doing it, I would say. Or that it gives you something. Yeah. Six bad paintings. Oh yeah. I get you. I've made a lot of bad paintings. All right. So my painting is now mostly dry, so we can get going on our next step, which we're going to put in the rocks in the distance. So we've got these rocks out here. I don't have any of my old art here with me, but I do have some at home, so maybe I'll do a video on that. We're going to paint these rocks out here. We just need some dark color. So I'm going to use my small brush. I like to mix together brown and blue to make it really nice, dark, kind of gray, almost black. But if you want to just use black, that's fine. But here's the brown and blue mixed together. Okay, so once you have your dark color, we're just going to fill in that rocky section. So hopefully you can see the your pencil sketch, but if not, just kind of wing it. Remember, it's that flat line on the bottom. Should be parallel to the horizon line. So that's where I like to start. Goes out to almost the middle of the page. And then once we get to the top of the rocks, these are just kind of jagged, wavy lines. And feel free to be creative with what these look like. While we're doing this as well, I'd just like to mention that my Venmo is listed in my bio and my PayPal is linked in my bio. So if you're enjoying this session and you feel like you've learned something and you'd like to leave me a little tip or a gift, that is always appreciated. You can do that there. Any amount that you feel comfortable with is totally fine. This is a full-time job for me, and tips do certainly help me pay my bills. So I'd just like to mention that. Okay, so there's our rocks. I find it so difficult to paint left-handed, so hard not to set my hand down. I mean, to be honest, right-handed people have that problem too if you're painting on the left side of the painting. So sometimes it's helpful. Some things that I like to do are spin my painting around if I don't need to be right side up on my painting to be filling in a certain spot. Turn around and do it upside down so you can rest your hand somewhere else, or just practice painting without resting your hand on the painting, which is just just definitely takes practice because we learn to write with our hand on the paper. Okay. Cool, cool, cool. Thank you. All right, so how'd everyone do with the rocks? Am I going at a good pace for everybody? We've got really like 1/2 steps left with this painting here. Thank you, everybody. Yeah, this is in Turks and Caicos, a place called Mujin Bay. Okay, so we need our grass colors. For this, we're going to use a kind of regular medium green, and then we also need a dark green. So I'm going to mix both of those. For my regular green, I've just got a couple greens in my palette that I like to mix together. I like to add blue. You can be creative, mix whatever, just like regular. You know, if I were to ask you to paint a leaf, what green would you use kind of green? Something like this. Got cloudier compared to the original. Yeah, I wanted to show how to make these clouds. Since we're here and I'm teaching you, I wanted to teach you something. At least give you the option. Okay, and then for a dark green, you can mix it with black and that will give you dark green. However, I really prefer to make my dark greens by adding in lots of blue and brown. I just think it gives you a more vibrant green color that looks a little bit more natural. So if you would like to go that route, just take whatever green you want and then add lots of blue and brown until you get a nice dark green. If you'd like to just keep it simple, just mix some green and some black to make it dark green. I usually go live every Saturday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. But this weekend I had a busy day yesterday, so I couldn't. But generally it's either Saturday or Sunday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, and I always have that listed on my TikTok, so you can find out which day it is. So there's our 2 green colors. Do you love looking at the colors I used after finished painting? Yeah, I do kind of like seeing these swatch cards at the end. It's kind of cool. Okay, so for this grass, we have 2 kind of different types of grass, and we're also going to mix a really nice light green, but we're going to do that later. So we have this really thin, actual grass looking stuff, and then we've also got kind of these bushes. So these are just going to be kind of dots that are put together, and then these are going to be more grass shapes. So you can kind of mix together those 2 techniques to make this grassy section. So I like to start with, you can start with whatever you want, but I like to start with my darker color. And I like to start with putting in just maybe some little grassy areas. Beach grass kind of grows in clumps. So if you want to make a few little clumps of this, kind of starting in the middle of the page and working our way over, that's a good spot to start. You can make them as tall as you want. The key is just to vary your shapes. So make them go in different directions, make them cross over each other, longer, shorter, some that are just really little stubby ones right on the ground, some that are overlapping everything because they're so tall. Just try and do lots of different things and put these little clumps in random areas. Key is variety. And then once we've gotten over here, we can add our bushes. So I'm just going to kind of make little dots with this dark green color. Kind of imagining the shape of a bush and leaving spots in between. So that when we go in with our lighter green color, we can fill in those little spots. So these are just kind of little dots. Focus the darker color toward the bottom, and then we're going to add the lighter color on the top. You can overlap this with the grass as well. Okay. So just for example, I'm going to switch over to my lighter green now. And it's okay if you do this while this is all still wet. I'm just gonna start filling in any of those little gaps and doing the same thing on the top of this little grassy section where I add the lighter green. And using these two colors should give you more of a three-dimensional effect where you can see shadows and highlights. Don't feel like you have to fill in the entire thing. Okay. So that's kind of the idea there. I can show you that close up as well. This is the idea. I'll probably add a little bit more. And this is, oh jeez. This is the time where we can kind of zone out and just paint some grass. Which is one of the more relaxing things to paint, in my opinion, once you get the hang of it. One of my favorite little things to do is blades of grass that are kind of hanging over like that. So you can add many of these, but just add a few. I'm just kind of bending over. I just think it looks fun. What's the best watercolor paper to use? That is totally up for debate. I really like Arches. Arches is probably my favorite. It's a little bit more expensive, but I really, really like it. I also like Fabriano. I've been using that a little bit more recently. Strathmore is good. This is good, like I use this for my paint and sips just because it's pretty cheap and I can just use it for my lessons. But I don't necessarily use Strathmore for like finished paintings and stuff. Okay. There's my grass. This is another thing you can overdo, so just keep in mind I could possibly overdo this. And one other thing that we want to do is add our really light highlights. So I want you to mix together some green and some yellow to make this really light green here. And then we can add that to the very top of this little bush section. Just a little bit of this at the very top will show that the sun hitting it and those really nice light colored leaves at the top. So that's green with a lot of yellow mixed in. Makes you a really nice, light, vibrant green. You can also use these other greens to add more color depth to the grass. I was just using the dark color, but you can also mix in that medium green or the light green to the grass sections if you'd like. Just to show that there's some lighter green grass in there too. Okay. Hopefully I'm not going too fast. You can always take and leave a lot of this advice. I'm just kind of throwing everything at it. Whatever you want to do. Take from it what you want and leave the rest. Dimensions of my paper, I think this is 6 by 8 here. Could be wrong. Let me see. 6 by 8. All right. And one last thing, I want to add some shadows under these bushes and grass, which just helps to kind of sink it into the sand, makes it look like it's actually there instead of just on top. So I like to use my brown and blue mixture again. I would recommend you do this time. A little bit more blue than brown, but mix them together. And then water that down a lot. We want this to be really light. At least start out light so that we can go darker later if we want. Just kidding. Go like equal parts brown and blue. Water it down. I'll swatch it for you. Nice and light there. Okay, and then we'll just start adding that in little kind of spots underneath those clumps of grass and underneath the bushes here. And this is a subtle change, but I think it really makes it look a lot more realistic that there are shadows underneath these bushes here. You can always make it darker if you feel like it needs to be darker. Just want to make sure you started light so that we have a place to go afterwards. You can also use this to add just some kind of dimples in the sand. I'd recommend you water it down even more. But, you know, away from the grass, you can kind of just add these little blobs, I guess. I like to use the side of my brush and just kind of put it down and pick it up as just a little bit of texture, like that. Yeah, these are kind of the footprints here. Okay, how are we doing on time? Cool, we got some time. Feel free to keep working on this as much as you want. You can continue adding grass and bushes and stuff. You can continue adding to this as we, even after this lesson is over. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. But we are going to move on to our last step, which is to add kind of the ripples and the waves in the water. So I'm again using my white gouache. If you have any sort of paint that is white and opaque, I would recommend that you use that. The white watercolor that comes in your watercolor tube or watercolor set is not usually all that opaque, so it will not stand out the way that you need it to for this. So I like to use any sort of opaque white paint. Yes, I like using gouache on top of watercolor. That's one of my favorite techniques for painting in general. So we're going to take our white paint, and I want to add, I'm going to show you here, a few places that we want to add these highlights. So I want to add a wave going past right back here. So this is kind of halfway in the middle of this water section. I want to add some white highlights around the rock section here. This just shows that there's water breaking around these rocks. And then we're going to add some kind of squiggly lines around the shore here. So those are the three places that we're going to do this. And we'll start with the wave. So for the wave, I like to just kind of do lots of little dots. As we work our way across, I'm just kind of picking up and putting down my brush pretty quickly. I also chose a spot where the colors kind of transition a little bit harshly, so I'm going to cover that transition up with this wave color. So if you have a spot that you don't particularly like in your ocean section, this is your opportunity to cover it up. And as we get over here, which is away from the viewer's viewpoint, we want to decrease the size of this wave. So then it just becomes kind of smaller dots and smaller little dashes over here. But over here on the left, it should be a little bit bigger. It shouldn't be that dramatic of a change, but just a little bit. And you can just continue adding these dots on top of each other until you're happy with what the wave looks like. Add a little bit of texture on the bottom of the wave too, maybe some lines, maybe a few more little dots, whatever you feel like. Okay, so that's the wave. We also have some breaking water around these rocks, so I like to start at the end, maybe just do a little bit. I like to add a little bit at a time and then see if I need more. So these are more like horizontal lines around the rocks here. Little dashes, basically. You can do a few dots, but mostly little spots with breaking water, kind of like that. some little white highlights around the shore where the water meets the sand. So for this, I like to get kind of more squiggly and a little bit more loose with it. We're going for just kind of some squiggly, wavy lines that show that the water there is meeting the sand. Don't worry about it looking a certain kind of way. Add some thicker lines, add some thinner lines. Just kind of let it kind of take your brush back and forth and pick it up and put it down in random spots. The more random you can be, the better it will look. Just follow the curve of the water around the beach. This is just a Strathmore watercolor pad, I guess. It's linked in my bio, in my Amazon art supply recommendations. All right. And lastly, if you want, you can add a few little, keep it horizontal, white highlights throughout this water section as well, if you want. It would just be sparing. Just add a few is fine. Again, if you have a spot that you want to cover up, this is a good opportunity to do that. All right. So I think that's our painting. Again, you can continue to add grass. If you want to keep working on that grass section, you can. You can keep adding these white highlights. You can layer over your wave if you want to add some more, if you want it to be more opaque. You can layer more over this if you want. Get some sections that are a little bit wider. But otherwise, I have no other instruction for you. So I will take off the tape, which is always the most satisfying part, so make sure you stick around. And I do want to thank you all so much for watching and for being here. Remember that my Venmo is listed in my bio and my PayPal is linked in my bio, so if you'd like to leave me a tip or a gift for today's session, that is always appreciated. Again, this is a full-time job, so tips do help me a lot. Make sure to check out my Etsy shop. I will hopefully be restocking soon. I will definitely restock soon, it just depends on when. That's also linked in my bio. There's still more stuff in there though. And yeah, I will be trying to upload this one and the last 3 to my Instagram, same handle as TikTok. Hopefully this week I'll go to a coffee shop and I'll be able to upload them there instead of at home because I've had some trouble with my Wi-Fi. So you can feel free to follow me on Instagram to see those as well. Same handle as TikTok, like I said. Make sure to sign your painting, make sure to put the date on your painting so that you know when you did it. You can look back and see your progress later. And again, thank you all so much for joining me. You can tip whatever you feel like. I do not have any I don't judge anything. Whatever you feel like you would like to tip is totally fine. And there's our final painting. So thank you all so much for joining me. I'll show you a little bit closer up too, see if we can get a little bit better focus on here. I think this turned out really nice.